bag full of narcotics.
Organised crime gangs is out of control now, and that's why our prisons have become powder kegs.
And they go, right, because you two were in debt, you go in that cell and you smack the crap out of that guy and you'll clear 50 quid, £100 of your debt.
It's a tinderbox. It is waiting for another Strangeways.
Hello and welcome back to Crime Suspect. Each week we'll be unravelling some of the UK's most prolific crimes, as well as providing in-depth analysis on the criminality that plagues our nation. On the show today, I predict a riot, with gang bosses planting sleeper agents behind bars to pump weapons and narcotics around cells. Could we be edging close to another deadly episode like that of the 1990 riot in Strangeways Prison? Next up, we'll be bringing you the best and worst of policing with our good cop, bad cop. And finally, it's your chance to book a crook as we show you this week's Wanted. Joining me for all of this today is former armed robber who served 22 years inside, has turned his life around and is now a TikTok mentor, Paul Simmons.
Oh, yeah.
General Secretary of the Prison Officers Association, Steve Gillen.
Hello.
And last, but by no means least, former prison governor, Vanessa Frake. Thank you all very much for being here. Now, you have the right to remain watching. This is Crime Suspect. Drugs, violence and weapons. Conditions inside our prisons are reaching breaking point. And with jails in England and Wales at around 99% capacity, tensions are simmering. The infamous riots of Strangeways Prison saw 147 staff and 47 inmates injured in the deadly protest, where a prison officer also lost his life. And as a result of the current levels of overcrowding and the staffing crisis blighting jails in the UK, experts are warning another catastrophe is bubbling on the horizon. Outside the prisons, it's another story. Gang bosses are recruiting so-called clean skins with no criminal record to become prison officers and act as sleeper agents for their drug smuggling operations. Once inside, the cartels are infiltrating the market, where narcotics are 3 times more expensive than on the streets. Steve, in light of all of what I've just said, how close are we to another full-blown riot in a British jail?
Peter, in your introduction there, you have just sowed all the seeds of those ingredients that were around when the Manchester Strangeways riot occurred. And back in 1990, of course, there was only, at that time, a population of 43,000 prisoners. We've now got over double that. So all the ingredients are there, and we want, like a public inquiry, a full royal commission, not just into our prisons, but into the whole criminal justice system, because prisons are the forgotten service as well. Policing is a lot more sexier, the NHS is a lot more sexier, education and so forth, and we are the forgotten service, but a very important public service at that, where the brave men and women on that thin line in prisons are actually keeping the lid on.
Vanessa, it's a vital public service. It
Yes.
turns lives around like Paul's.
Yes, I mean, and you know, Paul is a great ambassador for when the prison service works, it absolutely works brilliantly. I think it's very difficult as things stand at the moment to look at a prison service and be proud of a once very professional body. I think it's also very important to remember that, you know, the overcrowding, the lack of staff, the lack of experience, this all sort of goes towards violence in prisons, drugs in prisons. You know, it's not something new. This has been going on for years, and unfortunately, we are now at the saturation state where, you know, it's had about as much as it can before it goes, as Nick Hardwick said the other day, you know, it's a tinderbox. It is waiting for another Strangeways.
Did you face violence, physical violence?
Yeah, absolutely. Like many others, you know, I've been potted. That's faeces and urine thrown over me. I've had a chunk taken out of my arm. Somebody bit right through. I've had a slap. I broke my thumb. You know, violence, unfortunately, is it shouldn't be, but it is what happens in prison.
Paul, were you an angry prisoner?
I could be. I absolutely could be, especially early into my sentences, like when I received a 10.5-year prison sentence. I was in riot prison, ended up in a full-scale riot, you know, completely smashed the place up. So it can be like that. You can be like that, and it takes a lot. What you have to understand is you are locking all dangerous men in one spot, but also you're locking all the vulnerable men in the same spot. I always liken it to putting sheep and wolves in the same pen and expecting the chaos not to occur. And the chaos will always occur. You know, you've got big time drug dealers and you've got big time drug addicts. What do you expect to happen in that environment? Because it's just a community. I know lots of people beyond the wall don't see it that way, but prison is a community. You know, you'll have somewhere you can go to get alcohol. You'll have somewhere you can go to get canteen. Somewhere you can go to borrow some music off someone. Somewhere you can go to get your drugs. Just like outside, that's what happens within the prison.
I can't remember a time when it's been so bad. We're in crisis, absolute crisis. And Paul's right, it is like a community. They go to places to get their illegal alcohol, their illegal drugs. It's costing 50 grand a year to keep a prisoner in prison. Surely, to God, you know, in an adult society, we should be having that adult conversation to keep prison specifically for those to protect the public, i.e., your murderers, your rapists, your organised crime gangs. And by the way, organised crime gangs is out of control now. And that's why our prisons have become powder kegs.
And organised crime has placed some people into the jails in the role of prison officers.
Well, Peter, I'm not really surprised at that, given that we don't even do face-to-face interviews now for prospective prison officers. Now, I can't think of any other employment where that would happen.
I hear you agreeing with that. I take it took some considerable time for you to get into
Absolutely.
the service.
It took me 12 months from when I applied to actually when I walked through the gate the first day. And Steve's absolutely right. You know, the vetting techniques or lack of is predominantly what is causing some of the issues of some of the officers that are being recruited.
The corrupt ones?
The corrupt ones, yes.
Those who are deliberately corrupted and purposefully put into the system so they can deal drugs in jail. Paul, I have a lot of respect for the prison service. I went into many jails when I was in the police. But, of course, there are wrong-uns in every trade and profession.
Yeah.
Did you come across any corrupt prison officers?
Corrupt prison officers, yeah, lots.
And what were they doing?
Usually just bringing in phones and drugs for inmates. I'll come across one particular prison officer who was actually not only bringing in drugs, he was bringing in lock knives. So now there's real knives. They were circulating around the landing. And in the end, he got in so deep, he actually handed himself in and said, listen, they keep asking me to bring stuff in. And this isn't a new recruit officer either. This was someone who'd been in the service a long time. And he got completely caught up with it all. And he had to hand himself in. He was going, listen, I've got all of this stuff. They're asking me to bring it in. You know, who knows what happened to that officer.
Well, I'm very glad that his corrupt story does not have a happy ending. And of course, Steve, most people join the prison service, I'm sure, with the best of intentions.
Yeah, I would say 98% of prison officers work very hard on behalf of society. But let me tell you, I'm not going to sit here and deny that there is no corrupt prison officers, because clearly there has been, and they've been caught and they've been banged up themselves, and quite rightly, and I wish they'd throw away the key, because the prison service don't want them, my trade union doesn't want them, and more and behold, decent prison officers don't want them either. But what I would say is that, you know, they boast about it, they trot the same line out all the time, the Ministry of Justice, when they say, don't worry about the rise in assaults, the rise in drugs coming in. We've got airport-style security. Well, God help our airports then. Because let me tell you...
They don't work.
There is no security. They've done away with sniffer dogs in most prisons, right? They regionalised it. We told them not to. They got rid of all the experienced staff. We told them not to, but they didn't listen. But let me also, just on this particular point about corruption, I think they need to be searching day in, day out, randomly in each prison, not just in your high security jails, every prison.
Talking of which, Paul, how does that whole drug dealing work in prison? Because prisoners haven't got big wads of cash to pay for their drugs.
These days, it's a lot smarter. It's all about bank accounts. It's all about having a phone, having access to a bank account. Like, you can do this online, sat in your cell, right? You've got your smartphone, you get your people to go, right, there's my bank details. Tell your people to put 30 quid in, 50 quid in to my bank outside.
So the prisoner gets somebody who's on the outside of the jail to do a bank transfer to the account that the prison drug dealer nominates.
Yes. And that's what they do. So if you've got, this is the standard amounts, right? These people need to know these amounts. When you've got prisoners phoning you and asking you to put £25, £50, £100 and £150 into a bank account, it is only for drugs. It is not for, it's not to buy PlayStations or Xboxes. Like I used to tell my family, that's what I used to tell them. I used to tell them it was for all sorts, but it was always for drugs. Like the way the system is now, like they are very quick. It's like you can instantly check if the money's gone into your account, as we all know.
How much could a prisoner spend on drugs, say, in a week?
I could easily do £300, get myself into £300 worth of debt. And I mean debt, because I didn't have £300. I was an active addict for maybe 20 years of my prison life. I was actively using drugs. So you can easily get into hundreds of pounds worth of debt. And a lot of the dealers, they will let you get into debt because then they've got you. They have literally got you. You take a smack off of them, take a bit of an hiding, but they've got you. And, you know, they might whack you and they'll give you a little bit something, not for free. That'll go on to your debt. Do you know what I mean? Because they feel a bit out of order because they've just whacked you now. Like you're walking around with a big black eye around the wing. So they'll give you something. Don't worry, you pay me that next week, even though you ain't got it. So next week, what's going to happen? The same thing happens, violence, or they make you then go settle another dispute. So now I'm in debt and someone else is in debt and they go, right, because you two are in debt, you go in that cell and you smack the crap out of that guy and you'll clear 50 quid, £100 of your debt. Do you know what I mean? But they'll still let you continue to get in debt, continue to get in debt. I used to lie to people. I used to sit on phones, not even talking to anyone, in a cell going, yeah, can you send £25 to this account? I used to convince people all sorts of things. But the problem with that is it all come to a head. There's nowhere to run in prison. There's nowhere to hide. And that's where the real violence comes from. The real violence comes from the drug dealing. It's no different to out here at the moment with the gangs, with the machetes. It's the same within prison.
So Paul has very clearly described how things could be bubbling under for an individual in jail. If we multiply that out, have we actually got a situation where things are bubbling under across the landings, across the prisons, and is that lid about to blow?
Well, as I said at the very beginning, prisons are very complex. All the ingredients are there, as we've just identified. I thank Paul for his honesty. I knew it was complex. We knew that people get into debt. We even know that the families sometimes are threatened by these organised crime gangs and the drug dealers and so forth. People have been told to bring drugs up into the prison, secreted and different things. Listen, as I said as well, you can't take £700-800 million out the prison system and expect it to. That's a bit of, if someone says they want a car made, you don't hand them a hammer and chisel. There's got to be a properly funded prison service that's structured so that we are actually rehabilitating people like Paul. I mean, Paul's probably done it himself, actually, quite frankly, and he's recognised himself that his life he had to clean up, and he's doing brilliant work in places like Chelmsford Prison and so forth when I had a chat with him off air. And that should be commended. I'd rather listen to someone like Paul than any politician in the land, quite frankly.
That will, of course, take resources, and
Absolutely.
resources equates to money.
Exactly.
Now, Vanessa, recently, a journalist from The Times went undercover and got a job as a prison officer. And talking about the security systems that Steve's just mentioned, that journo said that the use of that equipment was very patchy. It wasn't all the time. It could be circumvented. People could get around it. And so what is the answer? How do we get the prison system working properly and efficiently so that we get more people like Paul coming out of those prison gates when they've done their time?
You know, I take a pinch from Steve, what Steve said. It does need a review, and not just the prison service, the whole justice system as a whole. We need to think as a society, you know, what do we want from our prisons? Do we want to just lock people up continually and throw away the key and not bother with them? Because at the end of the day, most of those people that are locked up will end up back in society. And I don't know about anybody here, but I'd like my taxes to go on something worthwhile, not keep people who shouldn't be in prison in prison.
The overwhelming majority will end up back in society.
Absolutely, because what we do is we focus on locking prisoners up. We don't focus on reducing reoffending. You know, we lock up the most prisoners in Western Europe. We have the worst reoffending rates in Western Europe. You know, the question I get asked the most is, does prison work? And I have to say at the moment, no, it doesn't. And locking people up for short-term sentences for non-violent first offence crimes is just a complete waste of everybody's time. You give a guy 12 months, out of that he'll do 6. He'll probably lose his home. He'll probably, definitely lose his job if he had a job. He's probably lost his support group, his family. And what he has had is 6 months working with prisoners who know what they're doing and have taught him well. So when he goes out and he's got absolutely nothing, what does he do? He turns to crime.
Steve, Vanessa, Paul, thank you predominantly for your honesty. It's been an enlightening conversation, and thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Right, moving on to this week's Cop Watch. This week, we shine the good cop spotlight on PC Dave Cave, who's been praised in Parliament as an exemplary role model for nearly 2 decades of dedicated service in law enforcement. PC Cave's commitment to ensuring the safety of the Cleethorpes area has earned him well-deserved recognition, including an award acknowledging his outstanding service to the community. Additionally, his recent receipt of a Civic Good Neighbour Award further demonstrates his commendable dedication to the beat. Dave, I salute you and I thank you. By huge contrast, Bad Cop, and branded by his victims as the devil and a pathetic excuse of a man is former Metropolitan Police Officer Cliff Mitchell. This disgraced PC was found guilty of 10 counts of rape, 3 counts of rape of a child under 13, 1 count of kidnap, and the breach of a non-molestation order, following a trial at Croydon Crown Court. That is quite a rap sheet. The court had heard he kidnapped and raped one of his victims at knife point in September 2023, telling her to put her arms behind her back before tying her up and putting tape over her mouth. He must serve a minimum sentence of 13 years and 225 days for his crimes, which took place between 2014 and 2023. 14 years is nowhere near long enough. All right, it's time for the part of the show where we bring you mugs of thugs who are terrorising our streets. Have you seen these suspects? First up, the Met Police are appealing to trace a man in connection with fraud offences. They are investigating 13 incidents where a man arranged to purchase items before providing fake evidence of a bank transfer and making off with the items. The suspect has given a false address in the West Drayton area and has used the aliases Ben Hudson and Joshua Harris. Next, we have 25-year-old Fred Gray, who is wanted by Manchester Police on recall to prison. Gray has links to Bury, Levenshulme and Stockport. Lastly, officers investigating an attempted robbery in Maidstone in Kent have released an e-fit image of a man they would like to identify, and it bears an uncanny resemblance to TV presenter Rylan Clark, although the individual depicted is not Rylan, okay? The suspect is wanted after a group of 4 men attempted to steal a woman's watch. When the victim refused, they resorted to assaulting her, leaving her with facial bruising. If you think you know or have seen any of these crooks, get in touch anonymously with Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. Thank you. Right, that's all we've got time for this week. Many thanks to Paul, Steve and Vanessa. Join us in a few weeks' time when I'll be heading out of the studio and onto the streets as we join the ranks on the front line of Britain's policing. Be sure to leave us a comment, like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon for more Crime Suspect.